Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Bintang Rizky Pratama. I'm here to do the pre-final exam about phonology. 1. Introduction. You probably want to know what the purpose of this course is and what you can expect to learn from it. An important purpose of the course is to explain how English is pronounced in the accent normally chosen as the standard for people learning the English spoken in England. If this was the only thing the course did, a more suitable title would have been English pronunciation. However, at the comparatively advanced level at which this course is aimed, it is usual to present this information in the context of a general theory about speech sound and how they are used in language. This theoretical context is called Phonetics and Phonology. The English Phonetics and Phonology website. If you have access to the internet, you can find more information on the website produced to go with this book. You can find it at www.cambridge.org/ELT/Peter Everything on the website is additional material. There is nothing that is essential to using the book itself. So if you don't have the access to the internet, you should not suffer a disadvantage. This website contains the following things. First, additional exercise material, link to the usable website, a discussion site for exchanging opinion and question about English phonetic and phonology in the context of the study of the book, recording of talk given by Peter Roach, other material associated with the book, a glossary giving brief explanation of the terms and the concepts found in phonetic and phonology, phonemes and other aspects of pronunciation. The nature of phonetic and phonology will be explained as the course progresses, but one or two basic ideas need to be introduced at this stage. In any language, we can identify the small number of regularly used sound, vowel, and consonant that we call phonemes. Accent and dialects. Language have different accents. They are pronounced differently by people from different geographical places, from different social class, of different age and different educational background. The word accent is often confused with dialect. We use the word dialect to refer a variety of language which is different from other, not just in pronunciation but also in such matter as vocabulary, grammar, and word order. Differences of accent, on the other hand, are pronunciation difference only. The accent that we concentrate on and use as our model is the one that is most often recommended for foreign learners studying British English. It has for a long time been identified by the name received pronunciation, usually abbreviated to its initial RP. But this name is old-fashioned and misleading. The use of the word received to mean accept or improve or approve is nowadays very rare, and the word, if used that in sense, seems to imply that other accent would not be acceptable or approved of. Since it's most familiar as the accent used by announcer and newsreader on BBC and British independent television broadcasting channel, a preferable name is BBC pronunciation. In talking about accent of English, the foreigners should be careful about the difference between England and Britain. There are many different accents in England, but the range become very much wider if the accent of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales included in Britain, and added together with the Northern Ireland from the United Kingdom, are taken into account. Within the accent of England, the distinction that is most frequently made by the majority of English people is between Northern and Southern. This is a very rude division, and there can be endless argument over where the boundaries lie. But most people on hearing a pronunciation typical of someone from Lancashire, Yorkshire, or other counties further north would identify it as Northern. This course deals almost entirely with BBC pronunciation. There's no implication that other accents are inferior or less pleasant sounding. The reason is simply that BBC is the accent that usually been chosen by British teacher to teach to foreign learner. It is the accent that has been most fully described, and it has been used as the basis for textbook and pronunciation dictionaries. If you are a native speaker of English and your accent is different from BBC, you should try as you work through the course to note what your main difference are for purpose of comparison. I'm certainly not suggesting that you should try to change your pronunciation. If you are a learner of English, you are recommended to concentrate on BBC pronunciation initially. Though as you work through the course and become familiar with this, you will probably find it an interesting exercise to listen analytically to other accents of English, to see if you can identify the way in which they differ from the BBC, and even to learn to pronounce some different accents yourself. 2. The production of speech sounds. Articulator above the larynx. All the sounds we make when we speak are the result of muscles contracting. The muscle in the chest that we use for breathing produce the flow of air that is needed for almost all speech sound. Muscle in the larynx produce many different modifications in the flow of air from the chest to the mouth. After passing through the larynx, the air goes through what we call the vocal tract, which end at the mouth and nostril. We call the part compressing the mouth the oral cavity, and the part that leads to the nostril the nasal cavity. Here, the air from the lungs escapes into the atmosphere. We have a large and complex set of muscles that can produce change in the shape of the vocal tract. And in order to learn how the sound speech are produced, it is necessary to become familiar with the different parts of the vocal tract. These different parts are called articulator, and the study of them is called articulatory phonetics. 1. The pharynx. The pharynx is a tube which begins just above the larynx. It is about 7 cm long in women and about 8 cm in men, and its top end it is divided into two. It is divided into two parts, being the back of the oral cavity and the other being beginning of the way through the nasal cavity. If you look in your mirror with your mouth open, you can see the back of the pharynx. The soft palate. The soft palate or palate is seen in the diagram in a position that allows air to pass through the nose and through the mouth. 3. The hard palate. The hard palate is often called the roof of the mouth. You can feel its smooth surface with your tongue. 4. The alveolar ridge. The alveolar ridge is between the top front teeth and the hard palate. You can feel its shape with your tongue. The tongue. The tongue is very important articulator, and it can be moved to many different places in different shapes. It is usual to divide the tongue into different parts through there is no clear dividing line with its structure. The part of tongue on a larger scale with this part shown: tip, blade, front, back, and root. 6. The teeth. The teeth, upper and lower, are usually shown in the diagram like a fig, one only at the front of the mouth, immediately behind the lip. This is for the sake of a simple diagram, and you should remember that most speakers have teeth to the side of their mouth, back almost to the soft palate. The tongue is in the contact with the upper side teeth for most speech sound. Sound made with the tongue touching the front teeth, such as English O, D, are called dental. 7. The lips. The lips are important in speech. They can be pressed together when we produce the sound p, brought into contact with the teeth as in f, or rounded to produce the lip shape for vowels like u, in which the lips are contact with each other are called bilabial, while those with lip to the teeth contact are called labiodental. Vowel and consonant. The words vowel and consonant are very familiar ones, but when we study the sound of speech scientifically, we will find that it's not easy to define exactly what they mean. The most common view is that vowel sound is in which there is no obstruction to the flow of air as it passes from the larynx to the lips. If we say that the difference between vowel and consonant is different in the way that they produce, there will inevitably be some case of uncertainty or disagreement. This is a problem that cannot be avoided. It is possible to establish two distinct groups of sound, vowel, and consonant in another way. What we're doing here is looking at the different contexts and position which is particular sound that occur this study of the distribution of the sound, and is of great importance in phonology. Study of the sound found at the beginning and end of English words has shown that two groups sound with quite different pattern of distribution can be identified, and these two groups are those of vowel and consonant. 1. Make vowel like E in English word see and look in the mirror. If you tilt your head back slightly, you will be able to see that your tongue is held up close to the roof of the mouth. 2. In making the two vowels described above, it is the front part of your tongue is raised. We could therefore describe E and A as the comparative front vowel. By changing the shape of your tongue, we can produce vowel which different part of the tongue is highest point. A vowel which in the back of the tongue is the higher point called by back vowel. If you make the vowel in the word calm, which we write phonetically as A, you can see that the back of the tongue is raised. Compare with this A in the front of mirror. A is a front vowel and R is a back vowel. The vowel in to, U, also comparatively back vowel, but compared with R, it is close. When you are familiar with this extreme vowel, you have, as mentioned above, a way of describing, classifying, and comparing vowel. For example, we can say that the English vowel I in the vowel cat is not as open as cardinal vowel number 4, R. We have now look at how we classify vowel according to their tongue height and their frontness or backness. There is another important variable of vowel quality, and that is lip position. Although the lip can have many different shape and position, we will at this stage consider only three possibilities. These are round, where the corner of the lips are brought toward each other and the lip pushed forward. This is most clearly seen in cardinal vowel number 8, U. Spread, with the corner of the lips move away from each other as for a smile. This is most clearly seen in cardinal number 1, E. Neutral, where the lips are not noticeably rounded or spread. The noise most English people make when they hesitating written R has neutral lip position. Now, using the principle that have just been explained, we'll examine some of the English vowel. English short vowel. English has a large number of vowel sound. The first one is to be examined as short vowels. The symbol of this short vowel are E, A, I, A, O, U. Short vowel are only relatively short. As we shall see later, vowel can be quite different length in different contexts. Example: word bit, pin, fish. E. A. Example: word bed, man, yes. I. Example: words bed, man, gas. A. Example: cut, come, rush. O. Example: bought, gone, cross. U. Example: word put, pull, push. There is one other short vowel which its symbol is A. This center vowel, which is called schwa, is very familiar sound in English. It is heard in the first syllable of the separate words about, oppose, perhaps. For example, since it's different from the other vowel in several important ways, We will study it separately in Chapter 9. 3. Wrong vowel, diphthong, and triphthong. To remind you that these vowels tend to belong, the symbol consists of one vowel symbol plus a length mark made of 2 dots. Thus we have E, E, U, O. We will now look at each of these long vowels individually. E. Example words: beat, mean, peace. Example word: bird, fern, purse. Example word: card, half, pass. Example words: board, torn, horse. Example word: food, soon, lose. Diphthong. BBC pronunciation has a large number of diphthongs, sound which consists of the movement or glide from one vowel to another. A vowel which remains constant and does not glide is called pure vowel. The total number of diphthongs is 8, though is increasingly rare. Triphthong. The most complex English sound of the vowel type are the triphthong. They can be very difficult to pronounce and very difficult to recognize. A triphthong is a glide from one vowel to another and then to a third, all produced rapidly and without interruption. For example, a careful pronunciation of the word hour begin with the vowel quality similar to a, goes on to glide towards the back close rounded area for which we use the symbol u, then end with the mid-central vowel squaw. We use the symbol o to represent the pronunciation of hour, but this is not always an accurate representation of the pronunciation. The principal cause of difficulty for the foreign learner is that present-day English, the extent of the vowel movement is very small, except in very careful pronunciation. Because of this, the middle of 3 vowel quality of the triphthong, the E or U part, can hardly be heard, and the resulting sound is difficult to distinguish for some of the diphthong and long vowel. To add to the difficulty, there's now also problem whether a triphthong is felt contain 1 or 2 syllables. Words such as fire or hour are probably felt by most English speakers with BBC pronunciation to consist of only 1 syllable, whereas player or slower are more likely to be heard as 2 syllables. We will not go through detailed description of each triphthong. This is partly because there is so much variation in the amount of vowel movement according to how slow and careful the pronunciation is, and also because the careful pronunciation can be found looking at the description of the corresponding diphthong and adding a to the end. However, to evaluate the triphthong, some example words are given here. Layer, player, liar, fire, loyal, lower, mower, power, hour. 4. Voicing and consonants. The larynx. The larynx is in the neck. It has several parts. Its main structure is made of cartilage, a material that is similar to bone but less hard. If you press down on your nose, the hard part that you can feel is cartilage. The larynx structure is made of 2 large cartilage. These are hollow and are attached to the top of the trach. When we breathe, the air passes through the trachea and the larynx. The front of the larynx comes to a point, and you can feel this point at the front of your neck, particularly if you are a man or slim. This point is commonly called the Adam's apple. inside the box made by these two cartilages are the vocal folds, which are two thick flap of muscle rather like a pair of lips. An older name for this is vocal cords. Looking down the throat is difficult to do and requires special optical equipment. But figure 11 show in diagram form the most important parts. At the front, the vocal pods are joined together and fixed to the inside of the thyroid cartilage. At the back, they are attached to a pair of small cartilage called the artenoid cartilage, so that if the artenoid cartilage moves, the vocal pods move too. The arytenoid cartilage are attached to the top of the cricoid cartilage, but they can move so as to move the vocal pods apart or together. We use the word glottis to refer to the opening between the vocal pods. If the vocal pods are apart, we say that the glottis is open. If they are pressed together, we say that the glottis is closed. This seems quite simple, but in fact, we can produce a very complex range of change in the vocal pods and their position. These changes are often important in speech. Let us look at 4 easily recognizable states of the vocal pod. It would be useful to practice moving your vocal pod into these different positions. 1. Wide apart. The vocal pods are wide apart for normal breathing and usually during voiceless consonants like p, f, s. Your vocal cords are probably apart now. 2. Narrow glottis. If air is passed through the glottis when it is narrowed as in figure 13b, the result is a fricative sound for which the symbol is The sound is now very different from a whisper vowel. It is called a voiceless glottal fricative. In position for vocal cord vibration, when the edge of the vocal cord are touching each other, or nearly touching, air passing through the glottis which will usually cause each other, or nearly touching, air passing through the glottis will usually cause vibration. Air is pressed up to the lung, and this air pushed to the vocal fold apart so that a little air escapes. As the air flow quickly past the edge of the vocal folds, the vocal folds are brought together again. This opening and closing happen very rapidly and is repeated regularly, roughly between 2 and 300 times per second in a woman's voice, and about the half that rate in an adult man's voice. 4. Vocal pod tightly closed. The vocal pod can be firmly pressed together so that air cannot pass between them. When this happens in speech, we call it a glottal stop or glottal plosive, for which we use the symbol. You can practice this by cocking gently. Respiration and voicing. How is air moved in and out to the lung? Knowing about this importance, it will make it easier to understand many aspects of speech, particularly the nature of stress and intonation. The lungs are like sponge that fill with air, and they are contained with the rib cage. If the rib cage is lifted upward and outward, there is more space in the chest for the lung, then they expand with the result that take in more air. We allow the rib cage to return to its rest position quite slowly. Some of the air is expelled and we can use for producing speech sound. If we wish to make the aggressive pulmonic airstream continue without breathing in again, for example, we saying a long sentence and not wanting to be interrupted, we can make the rib cage press down on the lung so that air more is expelled. If the vocal fold vibrate, we will hear the sound that we call voicing or phonation. There are many different sorts of voicing that we can produce. Think of the difference in the quality of your voice between singing, shouting, and speaking quietly. Or think of the different voice you might use reading a story to young children, in which you have to read out what is said by characters such as giant, fairy, mice, or ducks. Many of the different are made with the larynx. We can make changes in the vocal folds themselves. They can, for example, be made longer or shorter, more tense or more relaxed, or be more or less strongly pressed together. The pressure of the air below the vocal fold, the subglottal pressure, can also be varied. Three main differences are found. 1. Variation in intensity. We produce voicing with high intensity for shouting, for example, and with low intensity for speaking quietly. Variation in frequency. If the vocal cord vibrates rapidly, the voicing is at high frequency. If there are fewer vibrations per second, the frequency is lower. Variation in quality. We can produce different sounding voice qualities such as those we may call harsh, pretty, murmured, or creaky. Plosive. A plosive is a consonant articulation with the following characteristic. 1. One articulator is moved against another, or two articulators are moved against each other, so as to form a structure that allow no air to escape from the vocal tract. The structure is then total. B. After this structure has been formed and air has been compressed behind it, it is released. That is, air is allowed to escape. C. If the air behind the structure is still under pressure when the plosive is released, it is probable that the escape of air will produce noise loud enough to be heard. This noise is called plosion. D. There may be voicing during part of all of the plosive articulation. To give a complete description of plosive consonant, we must describe what happened at each following four phases in its production. 1. The first phase is when the articulator or articulators move to form the structure for the plosive. We call this the closing phase. 2. The second phase is when the compressed air is stopped from escaping. We call this the compression phase. 3. The third phase is when the articulator used to form the structure and move to allow air to escape. This is the release phase. 4. The fourth phase is what happened immediately after 3, so we will call it the post-release phase. English plosive. English has 6 plosive consonants: p, t, k, p, d, k. The plosive p, t, k are always voiceless. P, t, k are sometimes fully voiced, sometimes partly voiced, and sometimes voiceless. We will consider what p, t, k should be called in section 45 below. Portis and Lenis are the voice. The description of them may make it clear that it's not very accurate to call them voice. In initial and final position, they are scarcely voiced at all, and any voicing they may have seemed to be no perceptual important. Some phoneticians say that p, t, k are produced with more force than p, t, k, and that it would therefore be better to give a set of plosive. 5. Phonemes and symbols. The phoneme. When we speak, we produce a continuous stream of sound. In studying speech, we divide the stream into small pieces that we call segments. The principle involved here might be easier to understand if we look at similar situations related to the letters of the alphabet that we use in writing English. The letter of the alphabet in writing which correspond fairly well to the unit of speech we have been talking about earlier in this chapter, this segment. In the alphabet, we have 5 letters that are called vowels: a, e, u, e, o. If we choose the right context, we can show how substituting one letter for another will change meaning. Thus, with a letter P before and letter T after the vocal letter, we get the 5 words spelled pat, pet, pit, pot, put, each of which has different meaning. We can do the same with the sound. If we look at the short vowel I, o, u For example, we can see how substituting one for another in between the plosive P and T give us 6 different words as follow: pit, pat, pat, put, pot, put. Let us return to the example of letter of the alphabet. If someone who knows nothing about the alphabet saw this 4 character a, u, they would not know that user of the alphabet 3 of this character are represent the same letter, while the fourth is a different letter. Phonology. The comparatively straightforward business of describing the sound that we use in speaking. When we talk about how phonemes function in language, the relationship among the different phonemes, when in other words, we study the abstract side of the sound of language, we are studying the relate about the different subject that we call phonology. Phoneme sequence and syllable structure. In every language we find that there are restrictions on the sequence of phonemes that are used. For example, no English word begin with the consonant sequence ZBF and no word end with the sequence I. In phonology, we try to analyze what the restriction and regularity are in particular language, as it is usually found helpful to do this by studying syllable of language. Suprasegmental phonology. Many significant sound contrasts are not the result of the difference between phonemes. For example, stress is important when the word import is pronounced with the first syllable sounding stranger than the second. English speaker hear is as a noun, whereas when the second syllable is stronger, the word is heard as a verb. Intonation is also important. If the word right is said with the pitch of the voice rising, is likely to be heard as a question or an invitation to a speaker to continue, while falling pitch is more likely to be heard as confirmation or agreement. These examples show how contrasted extend over several phonemes, and such contrasts are called suprasegmental. 6. Fricatives and affricatives. Production of fricative and affricates. Fricative are consonants with the characteristic that air escapes through a narrow passage and make a hissing sound. Most languages have fricative, the most commonly found being something like s. Fricative are continuous consonants, which mean that you can continue making them without interruption as long as you have enough air in your lungs. Plosive, which were described in chapter 4, are not continuous. You can demonstrate an importance of the narrow passage for the air in the following way. 1. Make a long hissing S sound and gradually lower your tongue so that air is no longer close to the roof of the mouth. The hissing sound will stop as the air passage gets larger. 2. Make a long F sound and while you are producing this sound, use your finger to pull the lower lip away from the upper teeth. Notice how the hissing sound of the air escaping between the teeth and lip suddenly stop. Affricates are rather complex consonants. They begin as plosive and end as fricative. A familiar example is affricative heard at the beginning and the end of the word church. The fricative of English. English has quite complex system of fricative phonemes. With the exception of glottal, each place of articulation has pair of phonemes, one portis and one lenis. This is similar to what's seen with the plosive. The portis fricative are said to be articulated with greater force than the lenis, and their friction noise is louder. The lenis fricative has very little or no poising in initial and final position, but may be poised when they occur between the poised sound. We will now look at the fricatives separately according to their place of articulation. Example word fan, fan, safer, safer, half, half. These are labiodental. The lower lip is in contact with the upper teeth as shown in 18. The fricative noise is never very strong and is scarcely audible in case of few. The and the. Example word: thumb, thus, either, father, breath, breathe. The dental fricative are sometimes described as if the tongue were placed between the front teeth, and it is common for the teacher to make their students do this when they are trying to teach them to make this sound. In fact, however, the tongue is normally placed behind the teeth as shown in figure 19. With the tip touching the inner side of the lower teeth, the air escape to the gaps between the tongue and the teeth. As with f and f, the fricative noise is weak. S and z, z. Example word: zip, zip, facing, facing, rise, rise. These are alveolar fricative. With the same place of articulation as the and the air escapes through a narrow passage along the center of the tongue, and the sound produced is comparatively intense. Sh and z. Example word: shape, initial, and is very rare in English. Russia, measure, Irish, garage. These fricatives are called post-alveolar, which can be taken to mean that the tongue is in contact with an area slightly further back than that for z and z. If you make z then z, you should be able to feel your tongue move backward. And z. Ha. Example word: head, ahead, playhouse. The place of articulation of this consonant is glottal. This means that the narrowing that produces the friction noise is between the vocal port, as described in chapter 4. If you breathe out silently, then produce ha, you will moving your vocal fold from wide apart to close together. However, this is not producing speech. Phonologically, ha is a consonant. It is usually found before vowel. There is two rather uncommon sounds that need to be introduced since they are said to some association with ha. They will mention here. The first is the sound produced by some speaker in the word which begin orthographically. With h, most BBC speakers pronounce the initial sound in such word, which, why, whip, well, as well. But there are some, particularly when they are speaking clearly or emphatically, who pronounce the sound used by most American and Scottish speakers, a voiceless fricative lip with the same lip, tongue, and jaw position as well. The applicates of English. It was explained in section 6.1 that the and only two applicate phonetics in English. As with the plosive and most fricative, we have Portis Lenis pair, and the voicing characteristics are the same for this other consonant. Th is likely aspirated in the position where the p, t, k are aspirate, but not strongly enough for it to be necessary for foreign learner to give much attention to it. Portis consonant. The first point concerns that shortening of preceding vowel by a syllable panel Portis consonant. As was said in chapter 4, the effect is more noticeable in the case of long vowel and diphthong, although it does also affect short vowel. What happens if something other than a vowel precedes the consonant? This arises in syllable ending with e, m, and n, followed by Portis consonants such as p, t, k, as in belt, bump, bend, bang. The effect on those continuing consonants is the same on the vowel. They are considerably shortened. Portis consonants are usually articulated with open glottis, that is, with the vocal fold separate. This is always the case with fricative, where airflow is essential for successful production. However, the plosive and alternative possibility is to produce the consonant with completely closed glottis. This is type of plosive articulation, known as glottization. is found widely in contemporary English pronunciation, though only in specific contexts. 7. Nasal and other consonant. Nasal. The basic characteristic of nasal consonant is that the air is kept through the nose. For this to happen, the soft palate must be lowered. In the case of all the other consonant and vowel, the soft palate is raised and air cannot pass through the nose. In nasal consonant, however, the air does not pass through the mouth. It is prevented by a complete closure in the mouth at some point. A lateral consonant is one in which the passage of air through the mouth does not go in the usual way along the center of the tongue. Instead, there is complete closure between the center of the tongue and the part of the roof of the mouth where contact is to be made, the alveolar ridge in the case of L. R. This consonant is important in that considerable differences in its articulation and its distribution are found in different accents of English. As far as the articulation of the sound is concerned, there is really one pronunciation that can be recommended to the foreign learner of RP, and that is what is called a post-alveolar approximant. J and W. These are the consonants found at the beginning of words such as yet and wet. They have been called semivowel by many writers, but we will use the more modern term approximant. The most important thing to remember about this phoneme is that they are phonetically like vowel, but phonologically like consonant.